The transport ships descended through the orange sky of New Jeju like falling stars. Tae-min watched from the command deck of his warship as his soldiers moved across the human settlement below. The colony was small, maybe 5,000 inhabitants, mostly farmers growing strange earth crops in the alien soil. This was the 17th human world his fleet had visited in 3 months, and each time the pattern was the same. What puzzled Tae-min was how these humans reacted. Other species ran or surrendered immediately when the Vrelith Empire came calling. But humans fought back. Even now, he could see them on his display screens, using farming tractors as weapons, throwing homemade explosives, firing primitive slug throwers at his armored troops. It was pointless, of course. His soldiers wore shields that could stop anything these colonists had. But still they fought. "Commander, the harvest is complete," his second officer reported. 2,300 humans secured. Minimal casualties on our side. Tae-min nodded. The humans would be transported to the holding ships, then sold to labor worlds across the empire. It was good business. These humans were strong, adapted well to different environments, and lived long enough to be profitable. The Galactic Council had approved the salvage rights. Everything was legal. Far away on Earth, Admiral Ji-woo sat in his office staring at a wall of screens. Each screen showed a human colony. Each colony was dark, communications cut, populations gone. 50 million humans had vanished in 3 months. His staff had tried everything to track the raiders. But the enemy ships were fast and knew routes through space that human navigators had never mapped. "Admiral, we have confirmation," said his aide, a young officer named Hyun-soo. "The Vrelith Empire is responsible. They're selling our people as slaves." Ji-woo felt cold rage settle in his chest. He had fought in the border wars, had seen combat that would haunt him forever. But this was different. This was his people being hunted like animals, taken from their homes, sold to the highest bidder. "Get me diplomat Hai-jin. Tell her it's urgent." Across the city, Hai-jin prepared for another session at the Galactic Council. She had been humanity's voice to the stars for 5 years, working to build relationships with alien species. She believed in diplomacy, in finding peaceful solutions. But the message from Ji-woo made her blood run cold. The Galactic Council met in a massive station orbiting a neutral star. Hundreds of species sent representatives here, some so alien that they needed special environments just to survive. Hai-jin stood before the assembly, her hands shaking slightly as she presented evidence of the Vrelith raids. 17 colonies attacked. 50 million humans taken. This is not salvage. This is slavery. This is kidnapping. This is a crime against my people, and we demand justice. The Vrelith ambassador rose to respond. Krythax was 8 feet tall, his insect-like body covered in ceremonial armor. When he spoke, his translator box made his words sound casual, almost bored. The human speaks with passion, but without understanding. The Vrelith Empire has operated under salvage rights for 3,000 years. These colonies were undefended, unclaimed under proper galactic law. The humans inhabiting them are now classified as viable resource commodities. This is business, nothing more. Hai-jin wanted to scream. She wanted to flip the table and throw something at the smug alien. Instead, she forced herself to stay calm. Our people are not commodities. They are sentient beings with rights. Rights granted by whom? The voice came from the elder section. Ambassador Thelkaris of the Voran species spoke with the authority of a civilization that had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. Humanity has been spacefaring for 70 years. You are children in galactic terms. If you cannot defend your territory, perhaps you are not ready for the responsibilities of civilization. The council moved on to other business. Hai-jin's appeal was dismissed. She left the chamber feeling like she might be sick. In the holding cells of the Vrelith harvest ship Kalthering, Dong Hyan organized the prisoners. He had been a teacher on New Jeju, spent his days showing children how to grow tomatoes and corn in alien soil. Now he was a prisoner, sitting in a metal cage with 2,000 other humans. "We need to stay calm," he told the others. "Stay organized. Take care of each other." A woman named Ji Sun, who had run the colony's medical clinic, worked her way through the crowd, checking on the injured. An engineer called Sang Woo examined the walls of their prison, looking for weaknesses. They were scared, angry, grieving for homes and family members left behind. But they were not broken. Don Hyan noticed something the Vrelith guards didn't seem to realize. They were contemptuous of their prisoners, treated them like stupid animals. They talked freely around the humans, never imagining that some of them spoke other galactic languages. Dong Hyan had learned Vrelith trade speak for his farming exports. He understood every word the guards said. He learned about the ship's layout, about the guard rotations, about where they were going. He learned that they would be sold on Karvalum, a mining world where prisoners worked until they died. The average lifespan for slaves on Karvalum was 18 months. Dong Hyan shared this information quietly with Sang Woo and Ji Sun. They began to plan. Back on Earth, Admiral Ji Woo convened an emergency meeting. The room was filled with military commanders, government leaders, and intelligence officers. President Min Seo sat at the head of the table, her face grave. "Options?" she asked. "We can fight," Ji Woo said bluntly. "Our fleet is powerful. We have good ships, well-trained crews. But the Vrelith have been fighting wars for 3 millennia. Their technology is proven. Their tactics are refined. A direct confrontation could end with Earth itself under attack. So we do nothing?" asked General Taeyang, commander of the ground forces. "I didn't say that." Ji Woo pulled up a holographic display. "The Vrelith don't know anything about us. They think we're just another species of primitives who got lucky with faster-than-light travel. They don't know our history. They don't know what humans do when pushed to the edge." President Min Seo leaned forward. "Explain." "We've been preparing for war since we first looked up at the stars," Ji Woo said quietly. "Every weapon we designed, every tactic we developed, every horrible lesson we learned from killing each other, all of it was practice for a war we hoped would never come. But now it's here." He pulled up more displays, showing deployment plans, tactical analyses, psychological warfare strategies. The more Min Seo read, the paler she became. "This is total war," she whispered. "Yes, ma'am." "It is. The cost will be high. For us and for them. But the alternative is letting 50 million humans remain slaves, letting the galaxy know that we can be taken without consequence. If we do nothing now, this will happen again and again." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Ji Woo was proposing. It wasn't just a rescue operation. It was a statement. A line drawn in the stars that said, "Never again." President Min Seo looked around the table at her advisors, her generals, her intelligence chiefs. Then she looked at Ji Woo. "Operation Homecoming is authorized. Bring our people home, Admiral. Whatever it takes." Ji Woo saluted. "Yes, ma'am. Whatever it takes." The Vrelith raiders grew bolder. 3 more human colonies disappeared in the following weeks. Sagan Station, a research outpost studying alien plant life. Titan's Hope, where miners extracted rare elements from asteroid fields. Each time, the pattern was the same. Overwhelming force, quick extraction, complete communications blackout. The raiders came and went like ghosts. What the Vrelith didn't know was that ghosts were watching them back. Lieutenant Ji Soon commanded the stealth frigate Shadow of Bizon. His ship was one of 12 equipped with experimental cloaking technology that bent light and scattered sensor beams. For 6 weeks, he had followed a Vrelith harvest fleet through 16 different star systems, never once revealing his position. Target fleet is preparing to jump, reported his sensor officer, a woman named Yoonji. Same pattern as before. They're heading for the Kepler 442 system. Jae-sung felt his stomach twist. Kepler 442 had a human colony. 3,000 people, mostly families who wanted to live away from crowded Earth. They called their settlement Hope's Landing. Record everything, Jae-sung ordered. Every ship signature, every communication frequency, every tactical formation. But do not engage. Do not reveal our position. Sir, we could warn them and blow our mission. I know what I'm asking, Yoonji. Believe me, I know. The shadow of Bizin followed the raiders to Hope's Landing. Ji-sung and his crew watched through passive sensors as the Vrelith fleet descended on the unsuspecting colony. They watched the panicked evacuation attempts. They heard the distress calls. They saw the transport ships lifting off with thousands of human prisoners aboard. Every person on the shadow of Bizin wanted to intervene. Every person knew they couldn't. They were gathering intelligence that would save millions. But that knowledge didn't make it easier to watch 3,000 people being taken. After the raiders left, Jae-sung transmitted all collected data back to Earth via quantum burst. Then he followed the fleet to its next destination. On the prison world of Kar-Valoon, Dong Hyen and his fellow captives from New Jeju had been sold to mining corporations. The world was a nightmare. Toxic atmosphere required breathing masks at all times. Temperature swings from scorching days to freezing. Nights. The mines went deep into the planet's crust, extracting minerals that powered Vrelith technology. The guards told them the average survival time was 18 months. Dong Hyen intended to prove them wrong. Humans, it turned out, were tougher than the Vrelith expected. Where other species collapsed after a few months of brutal labor, humans adapted. Their bodies were designed by evolution to endure, to survive, to overcome. On Earth, humans had conquered every environment from frozen tundra to burning deserts. Kar-Valoon was harsh, but humans had survived worse. More importantly, humans organized. Dong Hyen made contact with other human prisoner groups across the planet's 13 mining complexes. The Vrelith had made a crucial mistake. They put all the humans on one world, thinking it would be easier to manage them. Instead, they had given Dong Hyen an army communication happened through maintenance tunnels that connected the mining operations. Messages were coded into work reports. A human engineer named B.O. Young, who understood the mining equipment better than the Vrelith overseers, began teaching others how to sabotage and reprogram the machinery. We're not escaping, Dong Hyen told his growing network of contacts. Not yet. We're preparing. When the time comes, we need to be ready to take this entire planet. People thought he was crazy, but they listened anyway. Because doing something, even something impossible, was better than waiting to die in the dark. Diplomat Hai-jin made one final attempt at the Galactic Council. This time she brought evidence collected by ships like the Shadow of Bizin. She had recordings, sensor logs, testimony from the few colonists who had escaped. She presented it all in a 3-hour session that left no doubt about what the Vrelith were doing. The council listened politely. Then they voted. 37 species abstained. 42 sided with the Vrelith Empire. Only 8 supported humanity's call for intervention, Ambassador Thulkaris, the ancient Varan who had dismissed Hai-jin's earlier plea, approached her after the session. You must understand. Young one, he said in what might have been a kindly tone. The Vrelith Empire is a pillar of galactic commerce. They control trade routes, manufacturing, resources. Your species has been in space for less than a century. You have no economic power, no military reputation, no political influence. The galaxy runs on stability, and stability requires maintaining relationships with established powers. Even when those powers enslave innocent people, every species goes through growing pains. The strong survive. The weak adapt or fade away. This is the natural order. Hai Jin looked at the ancient alien, this creature whose species had ruled the stars since before humans invented agriculture. She thought about everything her people had survived. Ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly destroyed their entire civilization. Humans had been weak many times in their history. They had never faded away. Thank you for your honesty, Ambassador. I'll be sure to remember it. She transmitted a coded message to Earth, all diplomatic options exhausted. Admiral Ji Woo received the message in his command center. Around him, holographic displays showed the disposition of every human military vessel. Hundreds of ships, from massive carriers to small frigates. Not enough to match the Vrelith fleet in a straight fight. But Ji Woo wasn't planning a straight fight. Initiate Phase 2, he ordered. All vessels to staging positions. Across human space, the fleet began to move. Reservists who had been living civilian lives received activation orders. Factories that had been making commercial ships switched to military production. Merchant vessels were retrofitted with weapons and armor, but the real preparation was happening in a secure facility beneath the Swiss Alps. This was where humanity kept its darkest knowledge. Dr. Dune was a military historian. She had spent 20 years studying every war humanity had ever fought. Not just the tactics and weapons, but the psychology, the strategies, the methods that worked, and the methods that failed. When Ji Woo had first proposed Operation Homecoming, he had come to Daeun with a simple question. What can we do that no one else in the galaxy would ever expect? Daeun had built him a catalog. Ancient siege warfare tactics, medieval psychological operations, industrial-era total war doctrines, 20th century information warfare, 21st century cyber attacks, weapons that humanity had banned for being too horrible to use on themselves. Now, she briefed fleet commanders via secure holo-conference. Officers from every human ship watched as she presented the catalog. The Vrelith fight according to tradition, Daeun explained. Ritualized engagements. Honor-bound combat. They announce their intentions, allow time for surrender, fight only military targets. They've been doing it this way for 3,000 years because it works for them. It's efficient. It's predictable. She pulled up historical examples from Earth. Humans don't fight that way. We've developed hundreds of methods to fight dirty, fight smart, fight mean. When we're outmatched, we innovate. When we're desperate, we adapt. And when we're angry, she let the sentence hang. A destroyer captain named Su Jin raised her hand. Are you saying we ignore the rules of war? I'm saying the Vrelith don't know humanity has rules of war. They think we're primitives who just discovered space travel. They have no idea we've spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing. We're going to use that ignorance against them. Another officer, a submarine commander named Wu Jin, who had transferred to space service, spoke up. This could go badly wrong. If we fight without rules, we become the monsters. Yes, Ji Woo said, appearing in the conference feed. We might. That's why every commanding officer will have civilian oversight. That's why we're documenting everything we do. That's why, when this is over, I expect to stand trial for what I'm about to order. But right now, 50 million humans are slaves. If fighting like monsters is what it takes to bring them home, then that's what we'll do. The conference fell silent. Every officer understood what was being asked of them. They were being asked to set aside the rules of warfare that humanity had developed after learning, painfully, what happened when wars had no limits. They were being asked to become what their ancestors had been: efficient, ruthless, terrifying. Final authorization comes from civilian leadership, Ji Woo continued. President Min Seo has approved the operation. She's also approved my court-martial when it's over. Any officer who can't follow these orders should resign now. No shame in it. This isn't what we trained for. No one resigned. Every commander accepted their orders. On the shadow of Bisan, Lieutenant Jae-sung received new instructions. Stop observing. Start acting. His mission had changed from intelligence gathering to something more direct. He was to mark targets for the main fleet, identify weak points, and when the time came, paint targets with laser designation. Finally, Yoon-ji muttered, I was getting tired of just watching. Ji-sung understood the feeling, but he also understood that what was coming would haunt all of them. The Vrelith were about to learn why apex predators shouldn't hunt humans. The lesson would be written in fire across a dozen star systems. The attack came at 0400 Galactic Standard Time across 14 Vrelith systems simultaneously. Human fleets appeared not at the safe jump points mapped in galactic navigation charts, but at high-speed emergence points mere light seconds from their targets. It was considered insane by galactic standards. The risk of collision, of misjumping into a planet or star, made such tactics unthinkable. Humans had been practicing them for decades. Captain Su Bin commanded the carrier Soul's Fury. Her ship emerged from faster-than-light travel 30,000 kilometers from the Vrelith. Harvest Fleet staging area at Korvath Station. Before the Vrelith could even register the arrival, Su Bin's fighter squadrons were launching. All wings, execute attack pattern Delta, she ordered. Hit them hard. Hit them fast. Make them afraid. 300 small craft screamed toward the Vrelith fleet. The massive harvest ships began powering their shields and weapons, preparing for the traditional exchange of long-range fire. They expected human ships to slow, to establish firing positions, to engage in the careful dance of ship-to-ship combat. Instead, the human fighters accelerated. They came in at speeds that pushed their pilots to the edge of blackout, weaving through defensive fire with maneuvers that seemed impossible. They didn't target shield generators or weapons arrays like civilized combatants. They went for sensors first, blinding their targets. Then they hit engines, crippling mobility. Finally, they struck life support systems. Commander Taemin watched in horror from his flagship as 12 harvest ships died in the first 30 minutes. Human fighters swarmed like insects, too small and fast for capital ship weapons to track. When his point defenses managed to lock onto a human craft, automated drones would throw themselves into the firing solution, sacrificing themselves to protect the piloted fighters. What kind of madness is this? His tactical officer screamed. They're using suicide drones. Taemin understood with sudden clarity. The humans weren't just fighting. They were demonstrating. Every tactic was designed to maximize terror. Every attack pattern was meant to show that humans fought with no regard for traditional rules of engagement. All ships retreat to. His order was cut off as the flagship shuddered. Something had breached the hull. Boarding parties. Humans were boarding his ship. The Marine team that hit Taemin's flagship was led by Lieutenant Min Ho. His squad moved through the Vrelith ship with practiced efficiency, clearing compartments with a speed that spoke of extensive training. They didn't use the energy weapons that were standard in galactic warfare. They used explosive rounds that tore through bulkheads. They threw grenades that created overpressure waves in enclosed spaces. They used close combat weapons that turned corridors into killing grounds. The Vrelith crew tried to fight back. They were trained soldiers, experienced in boarding actions. But they had never faced anything like this. The humans moved like they had been born for ship-to-ship combat, like they had spent generations learning how to kill in tight spaces. Minho's squad reached the bridge in 14 minutes. Tae Min tried to surrender. The Marines didn't accept. They secured him in restraints and dragged him toward the human ships. Behind them, the Vrelith flagship burned. Across 14 systems, the pattern repeated. Human forces struck with overwhelming violence, targeting not just military assets, but infrastructure. Communication relays were destroyed. Supply depots were captured or demolished. Trading posts that had facilitated the slave trade found themselves blockaded by human ships that appeared without warning. Admiral Ji Woo broadcast a message on all Vrelith frequencies. Return every human, alive and unharmed, within 72 hours. Refuse, and we will show you what total war means. This is your only warning. The message included footage from the attacks. Not sanitized combat reports, but raw recordings that showed exactly what human forces were capable of. The Galactic Council received the same footage. Species that had dismissed humanity watched in shocked silence as the youngest spacefaring race dismantled one of the galaxy's oldest empires. Ambassador Thelkaris called an emergency session. Hyjin attended, but this time she wasn't requesting aid. She was delivering an ultimatum. Every species that knowingly facilitated the slave trade has 72 hours to return all human captives and pay reparations, she announced. Those who refuse will face the same treatment as the Vrelith Empire. Your trade routes will be cut. Your merchant fleets will be seized. Your economies will be destroyed. The chamber erupted in outrage. A representative from the Korvan species, a civilization of tentacled aquatic beings, demanded to know how humanity dared threaten the established galactic order. Hyjin remained calm. You had an opportunity to stop this peacefully. You chose to side with slavers. Now you'll learn that humanity doesn't need your permission to protect our people. This is piracy. This is terrorism, shouted the Vrelith ambassador Crythax. No, Hyjin corrected. This is war. War as humans understand it. Total, unrelenting, without mercy for those who harm the innocent. You wanted to teach us our place in the galactic order. Congratulations. We've learned. Now you'll learn yours. On the prison world of Karvalum, Donghan received the signal he had been waiting for. It came as an electromagnetic pulse broadcast from the approaching human fleet, a specific frequency that shut down every electronic collar and tracking device the Vrelith used to control prisoners. Now, Donghayan shouted, "Everyone move!" Across 13 mining complexes, thousands of human prisoners acted simultaneously. Guard posts were overrun. Control centers were seized. Mining drones that B.O. Young had spent months reprogramming turned on their Vrelith masters. Humans poured out of their cells, wielding weapons made from industrial equipment. The uprising was brutally efficient. The Vrelith guards were trained to handle individual troublemakers, small-scale prison riots. They had no experience with a coordinated military assault executed by desperate people who had nothing left to lose. Ji-sun, the former medical officer from New Jeju, established a field hospital in one of the captured complexes. She treated wounded humans and, surprisingly, wounded Vrelith. Some of her patients questioned why she would help their former captors. Because we're not them, Ji-sun said simply. We're going to win this fight, but we're not going to become monsters doing it. Within 6 hours, humans controlled all 13 mining complexes. Donghayan stood on top of the central command tower, watching as human ships descended through the toxic atmosphere. He activated the general broadcast channel. Karvalum is ours. Come get us. The response came from Admiral Ji Woo himself. Hold position. Transport is en route. And Dong Hyan? Well done. Other enslaved species on Kar Valoom, seeing their captors fall, joined the rebellion. Prolaxian workers who had been mining alongside humans picked up weapons. Kren laborers who had survived 3 years of imprisonment fought beside humans who had been there for months. The prison world became a symbol proof that the Vrelith Empire's power was an illusion. Commander Tae-min, imprisoned aboard a human vessel, watched through a viewport as his civilization burned. He finally understood the mistake his people had made. They had assumed humans were like other young species, easily cowed by superior technology, respectful of ancient empires, grateful for any scraps of recognition the established powers might offer. They had never asked why a species would develop such efficient methods of killing. They had never wondered what kind of history would teach a people to fight with such controlled fury. They had never considered that a species might reach the stars, not because they were peaceful explorers, but because they had survived 10,000 years of war against themselves. Human guard named Hyan-Su brought Tae-min his evening meal. The Vrelith commander asked a question that had been bothering him. Why do you feed us? Why do you treat prisoners according to rules? You're winning because you fight without honor. Why stop at that? Hyan-Su considered the question. We fight hard because we have to. We fight mean because it saves lives. But we have rules because without them, we become the thing we're fighting against. It's a balance. You wouldn't understand. Explain it to me. Your empire enslaves people and calls it business. You follow traditions and call it honor. We're showing you that traditions don't matter when you're fighting people who refuse to play by your rules. But we have our own rules, our own lines we won't cross. Treating prisoners with basic dignity is one of them. Tae-min thought about this. His empire had ruled for 3,000 years by following the ancient ways. They had never imagined those ways might be obsolete, that a younger species might rewrite the rules of galactic warfare in a few short months. The 72-hour deadline approached. Some Vrelith systems began returning human captives, desperate to avoid further attacks. But the Vrelith High Command refused to surrender. They believed humanity's threats were exaggerated. They believed their superior technology would eventually prevail. They believed that the galactic order would reassert itself. They were wrong on all counts as the 72-hour deadline passed. Approximately 60% of captured humans had been returned, scattered across neutral stations where human ships waited to collect them. But 40% remained missing. The Vrelith High Command, supported by 3 allied species, declared that humanity's demands were impossible to meet and refused further cooperation. Admiral Ji Woo authorized Phase 3. The human fleet arrived at Vrelith Prime, the throne world of the Empire that had ruled for 3,000 years. The planet was massive, beautiful, covered in crystalline cities that glittered in the light of twin suns. It held 2 billion Vrelith civilians. The fleet didn't attack. Instead, they established a complete blockade. Every jump point in and out of the system was covered by human vessels. Minefields were deployed in orbital patterns. Any ship attempting to enter or leave was stopped, boarded, and turned back. People of Vrelith Prime, Ji Woo broadcast on every frequency. Your government has refused to return our people. Therefore, nothing enters or leaves this system until they comply. We will not harm your civilians, but we will not allow supplies through. You have 30 days of food reserves, 20 days of medicine, 15 days of critical industrial supplies. Your leaders know how to end this. The choice is theirs. On Vrelith Prime, panic spread through the population. The throne world had not been threatened in 15 centuries. Their military assured them the blockade would be broken within days. But days passed and no relief came. Supreme Commander Kryvel convened the War Council in the Eternal Palace. His generals reported that human forces were scattered across 100 systems, striking at will, impossible to pin down for a decisive battle. Then we strike at their heart, Kryval decided. We attack Earth itself, force them to recall their fleet to defend their homeworld. The plan was approved. 300 warships, the largest mobile fleet the Vrelith had ever assembled, began the long journey to the Sol system. They traveled through rarely used jump routes to avoid human patrols. Intelligence suggested Earth was lightly defended. Most of humanity's military was spread across Vrelith space. The fleet arrived at Sol and found it seemingly undefended. No massive battleships guarded the approaches. No fortress stations hung in orbit. Kryval suspected a trap, but saw no alternative. They had come too far to turn back. All ships advanced toward the third planet. Target military facilities and infrastructure. Avoid civilian casualties where possible. The fleet pushed deeper into the system, passing Mars, crossing the asteroid belt. That's when the trap was sprung. The entire asteroid belt erupted. Hundreds of weapons platforms that had been hidden inside asteroids activated simultaneously. Railguns that accelerated projectiles to a fraction of light speed. Missile silos that unleashed thousands of warheads. Energy weapons powered by fusion reactors buried in kilometer-wide rocks. Captain Haiyan Wu commanded the defense network from Ceres Station, the largest asteroid in the belt. He had spent 3 years turning humanity's birthplace into the most heavily fortified system in known space. Every rock bigger than a house had been surveyed. Thousands had been turned into weapons platforms. The asteroid belt was no longer just rocks. It was the largest minefield in galactic history. Fire at will, Haiyan Wu ordered calmly. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth. The Vrelith fleet walked into a killing field. Ships died by the dozens in the first minute. Their shields couldn't handle the sheer volume of fire. Their point defenses were overwhelmed. They tried to return fire, but couldn't identify targets. Every asteroid looked the same, and the weapons platforms were hidden until they fired. Kryval ordered a retreat. That's when he discovered that human ships had emerged from faster than light behind his fleet, cutting off escape routes. His 300 warships were trapped between hidden weapons platforms and human battle groups. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. 2 hours later, 63 Vrelith ships limped away from Sol, severely damaged. 237 ships were destroyed. 50,000 Vrelith crew were dead. The survivors transmitted recordings back to Vrelith Prime, footage of Earth's defense network, of human tactics, of the methodical destruction of their fleet. The message was clear. Humanity had turned their homeworld into a fortress that no fleet could crack. And they had done it while simultaneously attacking across Vrelith space. The galaxy's newest spacefaring species had just demonstrated military capabilities that outmatched civilizations 10 times older. On the prison processing station orbiting Varthik, engineer B.O. Young led a rescue operation. She had been freed from Karvaloom and immediately volunteered for hostage recovery. Her team specialized in fast, surgical strikes. Get in, secure the captives, get out. The boarding action took 1 hour. B.O. Young's team hit the station with overwhelming force, using breaching charges to open multiple entry points simultaneously. Station security tried to resist, but were quickly overwhelmed. The remaining human captives, 2,300 people who had been processed for sale, were secured. But B.O. Young also accessed the station's records. What she found made her feel sick. "Admiral, we have a problem," she reported to Ji Wu via secure channel. These records show that over 40,000 humans have already been sold and shipped to buyers across the galaxy. They're scattered among dozens of species, hundreds of worlds. Some were sold months ago. Ji Wu closed his eyes. He had hoped all the missing humans were in central processing facilities. The reality was far worse. Recovering every captive would take years, not months. It would require operations in systems controlled by species who had nothing to do with the original raids, but who had bought humans in good faith from Vrelith traders. He made a decision that would change humanity's relationship with the galaxy forever. Broadcast this message on all channels, all languages, Jiwoo ordered. Make sure every spacefaring species receives it. The broadcast went out minutes later. It appeared on commercial channels, military frequencies, and diplomatic networks. Every species capable of receiving radio signals heard Admiral Jiwoo's declaration. Humanity hereby declares a galactic right of pursuit. Any individual, corporation, or government found to be holding humans against their will shall be subject to immediate sanction, up to and including military action. There will be no negotiations, no exceptions, and no mercy for slavers. We don't care if you bought humans legally under your laws. We don't care if you claim ignorance. Return our people or face the consequences. The Galactic Council convened in emergency session. The ancient species who had dismissed humanity's earlier pleas now faced an impossible situation. Humanity was claiming the right to conduct military operations in any system, regardless of sovereignty. It was unprecedented. It was illegal under every galactic treaty, and humanity clearly didn't care. Ambassador Thelkaris confronted Hai Jin in the council chambers. Your species is declaring war on the entire galaxy. You cannot possibly believe you can enforce such a claim. Hai Jin met his gaze without flinching. Would you prefer we ask permission, or would you prefer we demonstrate what happens when permission is denied? We've shown what we can do to the Vrelith Empire. Do you really want to test whether we can do it to everyone else? This is madness. You're destroying the galactic order that has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Your galactic order allowed our people to be enslaved. Your peace was built on the suffering of those too weak to resist. Well, we're not too weak, and we're not asking for permission anymore. We're telling you how things are going to be. The council dissolved into chaos. Some species called for economic sanctions against humanity. Others suggested military action. A few, quietly, began searching their own records for any humans who might have been acquired through Vrelith traders, preparing to return them before human ships arrived. On Vrelith Prime, the blockade continued. 30 days became 40, then 50. Food riots broke out in the crystalline cities. The government rationed supplies, but it wasn't enough. The Vrelith military tried 3 times to break the blockade. Each attempt ended in disaster. Supreme Commander Kryvel finally requested a meeting with Admiral Jiwoo. The 2 commanders met via hologram, each from their respective flagships. What do you want? Kryvel asked. Total surrender? The destruction of my people? I want every human returned, Jiwoo said simply. Every single one. And I want compensation for the victims. And I want your government to acknowledge what it did and promise it will never happen again. Impossible. The High Command will never agree. Then your people will starve. I'm not negotiating, Commander. I'm stating terms. Meet them or don't, but the blockade stays until you do. Kryvel stared at the human admiral. How can you be so cold? There are civilians down there. Children. Jiwoo's expression hardened. You took 50 million of my people. You sold them like cargo. You worked them to death in mines. Now you want me to care about your children? Meet my terms. The transmission ended. 5 days later, the Vrelith High Command capitulated. 6 months after the first Vrelith raid on New Jeju, the war ended. It didn't end with a grand treaty or ceremonial surrender. It ended with the complete collapse of the Vrelith Empire. Their economy was shattered, their military broken, their subject species in open revolt. The throne world that had ruled for 3,000 years now relied on human aid shipments to feed its population. Dong Dashian stood on a platform in the Galactic Council chambers, addressing representatives from 100 worlds. He had been appointed as humanity's special envoy for freed peoples, a role he never imagined when he was teaching children to grow tomatoes. "The war is over," he began, "but the work of peace is just beginning." 47 species suffered under Vrelith rule. Many of you were taken as slaves, just like humans were. Today, we're here to help you build something better. The freed species watched him cautiously. They had seen what humans could do in war. Now they wondered what humans would do in peace. Would the liberators become conquerors? Dong Haiyan continued. Humanity is offering technical assistance, economic support, and military protection to any species that wants to establish independent government. We're not asking for payment. We're not demanding territory. We're doing this because it's right. A representative from the Kren species, a small furry being who had spent 5 years in Vrelith mines, stood up. "Why should we trust you? Every powerful species in this galaxy has exploited the weak. What makes humans different?" "Because we remember what it's like to be powerless," Dong Haiyan answered quietly. "Every human in this galaxy descends from people who were once slaves, who were once conquered, who were once told they didn't matter. We remember. And we're not going to let it happen to anyone else if we can prevent it." Over the following months, 23 new independent governments formed former Vrelith territories. Human engineers helped build infrastructure. Human agricultural experts shared farming techniques. Human military advisors trained defense forces. The galaxy watched in amazement as humans poured resources into rebuilding worlds. They had helped liberate, but not everyone was grateful. Not everyone trusted humanity's intentions. And humanity itself struggled with what it had become. Admiral Ji Woo stood trial before a tribunal of civilian judges in Geneva. President Min Seo herself led the prosecution, charging him with exceeding his authority, committing acts that bordered on war crimes, and risking humanity's extinction for the sake of vengeance. "Admiral, you ordered attacks on civilian infrastructure," Min Seo stated during the trial. "You authorized tactics that we banned after the resource wars. You conducted military operations without proper civilian oversight. How do you plead?" "Guilty on all charges," Jiwoo said without hesitation. "I knew what I was doing was wrong. I did it anyway because the alternati." Vei was letting 50 million humans remain slaves. "I made choices that should haunt me forever. They do haunt me. But I would make the same choices again." The tribunal debated for 3 weeks. The world watched. Some called Ji Woo a hero who had saved humanity. Others called him a war criminal who had stained humanity's honor. The truth, as always, was complicated. The final verdict came from Chief Justice Park, a woman who had lost family in the colonial raids. "Admiral Ji Woo, this tribunal finds you guilty on all charges. However, your sentence is suspended. You will continue to serve as admiral, but under strict civilian oversight. A council of civilian advisors will review all major military decisions. You will also undergo psychological counseling and will provide testimony for a complete historical record of Operation Homecoming." She paused, looking directly at Ji Woo. "We do this not because we approve of your methods, but because we recognize that you achieved what needed to be achieved. The message has been sent. Humanity will defend itself with overwhelming force. But we must also send another message, that force is controlled by law, not by individual decisions. You fought like a monster to protect our people. Now you'll serve under rules that ensure we never become monsters." Ji Woo accepted the verdict. He knew he had gotten off lightly. He also knew the nightmares about what he had ordered would never stop. The Galactic Council underwent dramatic restructuring. The elder species who had dominated for millennia found their power reduced. New species, including humans, gained seats on the executive committee. Diplomat Hai-Jin became the first human representative to sit in the highest levels of galactic government. Her first act was to propose the Sentient Rights Accords, a comprehensive treaty banning slavery, forced labor, and exploitation of less developed species. Every species that had participated in the slave trade, directly or indirectly, had to sign or face isolation. This isn't punishment, Hai-Jin explained to the assembled council. This is evolution. The galaxy needs to move beyond the old ways. The strong don't have the right to exploit the weak. Power brings responsibility, not privilege. Ambassador Thelkaris, the ancient Voron who had dismissed humanity's initial pleas, spoke against the proposal. You cannot simply erase traditions that have existed for millennia. The Galactic Order permitted the enslavement of 50 million humans. Hai-Jin interrupted. The Galactic Order told us to accept our place. We rejected that order. Now we're building a better one. You can join us, or you can be left behind. 87 species signed the Sentient Rights Accords in the first month. Within a year, every major spacefaring civilization had agreed to its terms. Those who refused found themselves cut off from trade, isolated from galactic commerce, watching as their influence faded. On New Gigi, the colony where the raids had first begun, survivors returned home. The settlement was rebuilt, crops were planted again, life slowly returned to normal. But a monument stood at the landing site, where the first humans had been taken. Engineer Su Jin, who had lost her husband and daughter in the raids, designed the memorial. It was a wall of black stone listing every human taken from New Gigi, with spaces left for those still being recovered. Beside it stood a second controversial monument, a list of Relith who died in the war, both military and civilian. The inscription between the two lists read, "We do not forget what was done to us. We do not forget what we did in return. May our children learn from both." Some humans objected to memorializing the enemy dead. Su Jin stood firm. My family died because the Vrelith thought we didn't matter. I won't dishonor their memory by pretending Vrelith civilians didn't matter either. We fought hard. We fought mean. We won. But we're not going to pretend there wasn't a cost, for them and for us. 5 years after the war ended, humanity had recovered most of its people. Some were found on labor worlds, others in private holdings, a few in isolated systems where news of the war hadn't reached. Each recovery operation was documented, each freed human given counseling and support to reintegrate into society. But not everyone came home. 3,000 humans were confirmed dead, worked to death in mines, or killed during the initial raids. Their names joined the memorial walls on New Jeju and other colony worlds. Commodore Jae-Sung, promoted from his role as stealth frigate commander, now led a joint task force patrolling trade routes. His crew included humans and former Vrelith subjects, working together to maintain the new peace. They intercepted a distress call from a merchant vessel under attack by pirates. The pirates, seeing a human ship respond, immediately ceased their attack and fled at maximum speed. They didn't even wait to see if we were armed, noted his censor officer Yoon-ji. They just ran. A young Vrelith officer named Kray Tan, whose father had died during the defense of Vrelith Prime, spoke quietly. Humans are feared now. Throughout the galaxy, parents tell children stories about human ships that appear without warning, about human tactics that ignore all traditional warfare. You've become the monsters that chase away other monsters. Jae-Sung considered this. Fear is a poor foundation for peace. But it's a start. Maybe in a few generations, the fear will fade and respect will remain. Or maybe we'll have to prove ourselves all over again. You regret what your people did? Kray Tan asked. Every day. but I don't regret why we did it. That's the burden we carry. In the Galactic Council archives, Dr. Dayun worked with her counterpart from the Voran species, a historian named Felmaris, who was old enough to remember when humans first achieved spaceflight. Together, they compiled a comprehensive history of the war. "Why do you insist on documenting everything?" Felmaris asked. "The victories, yes, but also the mistakes, the atrocities, and moral failures. Other species would hide such things." Dayun looked up from her work. "Because we've been here before, in our own history. We've been conquerors and liberators, victims and oppressors. We know how easily the righteous become tyrannical. So we remember everything, good and evil, to ensure we never forget the cost of both." "Your species is strange," Thelmaris observed. "You fight with such fury, then agonize over your own actions. You demonstrate overwhelming power, then submit to your own laws. You terrify the galaxy, then offer friendship to former enemies." "We're trying to be better than we were," Dayun explained. "We spent thousands of years learning how to destroy each other. Now we're trying to use that knowledge to protect others instead. We don't always succeed, but we keep trying." The final entry in the historical record was written by President Min Seo, now retired but still highly respected. She wrote, "The galaxy was warned never provoke humans. The warning came too late for the Vrelith Empire, but the lesson was learned by all who remained. We claimed our place among the stars not through superior technology or ancient lineage, but through the certainty that we would sacrifice anything, endure anything, do anything to protect our own. We pay a price for that certainty. We discovered that the skills we developed for killing each other worked equally well against alien enemies. We learned that the horrors we thought we had left behind on Earth could be exported to the stars, but we also learned that we could choose. Choose to help rather than conquer. Choose to build rather than destroy. Choose to remember our victims and our enemies with equal honesty. The galaxy will never again mistake human patience for weakness or human mercy for vulnerability. And humanity will never again allow ourselves to be taken without consequence. This is our legacy. This is our warning. This is our promise. We are human. We remember. We endure. We protect our own, and we're just getting started."